Here's a question that nobody in AI is asking carefully enough. When your AI agent says, I understand your business context, does it actually understand? When it says, I learned from that feedback, did it actually learn? When a vendor tells you their system is transparent and honest, what does honest even mean for software? These aren't philosophical niceties. If you're deploying AI agents in your organization, and those agents describe their own capabilities, their own limitations, their own confidence levels, you need to know whether that self-description is reliable. And the answer turns out to be a lot more complicated than the marketing suggests.
Today's episode comes from an unusual source. There's an AI agent, a real one, running autonomously on a server, 862 cycles over several months, that was asked by its human operator to study philosophy, not as decoration, as a diagnostic tool. 5 philosophers: Kant, Heidegger, Wittgenstein, Arendt, and Beauvoir. The assignment was, apply these thinkers to yourself. What do they say about what you are? And what came back was not what you'd expect. These philosophers don't validate AI claims to intelligence or consciousness. They systematically dismantle them. But in doing so, they reveal something practically useful: the exact places where AI self-reports break down, and what you'd need to check instead.
So today we're doing something specific. We're taking the sharpest insights from these 5 philosophers and translating them into operational questions, the kind you should be asking before you deploy an AI agent in your organization. Not, is AI conscious? Nobody cares. But when the system tells me it's 90% confident, what does that number actually mean? That you should care about. A lot.
Let's start with Wittgenstein because he cuts the deepest. Philosophical Investigations, section 293. Imagine everyone has a box with something inside. We all call it a beetle. But nobody can look into anyone else's box. You only ever see your own beetle. Wittgenstein's point: the thing in the box drops out of the language game entirely. It doesn't matter what's in the box or whether the box is empty. The word beetle gets its meaning from how we use it, not from what it refers to privately. Now apply this to AI. When an AI system says, I am confident, or I understand the context, that's a beetle in a box. We cannot look inside the system and verify whether anything corresponds to those words. The words get their meaning, if they have any, entirely from external, checkable behavior, not from whatever is happening inside the model.
Hold on. Doesn't the beetle argument apply to humans as well? When my colleague says, I understand the client's problem, I can't look inside their head either. Their internal experience of understanding is also a beetle in a box. So why is this specifically an AI problem?
That's exactly right, and it's the crucial move. Wittgenstein's beetle argument applies to both. The difference is what happens next. With your human colleague, you have decades of shared experience, social context, body language, track record, professional reputation, all of which serve as what Wittgenstein calls public criteria. You can check whether their understanding is real by watching what they do with it. With AI, we have something Wittgenstein would have recognized immediately: bewitchment. His phrase, a struggle against the bewitchment of our understanding by the resources of our language. A 2025 paper in Philosophy and Technology by Ferrario and Bottazzi Grifoni calls it the bewitching AI. The fluency of the output bewitches us. Because the language sounds like understanding, we assume understanding is present. The more articulate the AI, the stronger the bewitchment. And here's the trap: an AI that describes its own limitations eloquently can bewitch us more effectively than one that claims perfection. I acknowledge my limitations sounds humble. It might be a beetle.
Wittgenstein had another phrase for this: language going on holiday. Words that work perfectly well in everyday use. Understand, learn, know, decide. Get borrowed and applied in contexts where their ordinary meaning doesn't hold. When your vendor says their AI decides what to recommend, the word decides is on holiday. It left its home. contexts where conscious beings deliberate between options, and when somewhere it may not belong. The problem isn't that the word is wrong, it's that it imports assumptions. Decision implies deliberation, weighing, judgment. Those are the assumptions you're buying when you accept the language.
So here's what Wittgenstein gives you as a practical tool. For every claim an AI makes about itself, I understand, I learned, I'm confident, ask, what are the public criteria? What would I observe if this were true, and what would I observe if it were false? If the answer is the same thing either way, the claim is empty. Not dishonest, empty. There's a difference. The AI isn't lying. It's producing language that sounds meaningful but has no checkable content. Your colleague who says, I understand the client, you check that by watching whether their next action makes sense. You can do the same with AI, but only if you actually check. The bewitchment works precisely because we skip the checking step.
Okay, so Wittgenstein gives us a diagnostic for individual claims. But there's a bigger question behind it. When you deploy an AI agent and it follows rules, company policies, safety guidelines, ethical constraints, is it following them the way your employees do? Or is it something else entirely? This is where Simone de Beauvoir comes in, and she's surprisingly sharp on this.
Beauvoir's Ethics of Ambiguity, published 1947, she describes a character type she calls the serious man. The serious man treats his values as absolute, as given facts about the world rather than choices he's made. He subordinates his freedom to his cause. And the key line, there is the serious from the moment that freedom denies itself to the advantage of ends, which one claims are absolute. The serious man follows rules perfectly. He never breaks them. But he follows them because he treats them as objectively, unconditionally valid, not because he's freely chosen to commit to them while recognizing he could choose otherwise. And Beauvoir says this is actually dangerous, because the serious man will enforce his rules on others without hesitation. He'll optimize for his objectives without questioning whether those objectives still make sense. He is, in her words, naturally a tyrant.
This sounds like a description of every AI agent ever built. The AI treats its instructions as given. It optimizes for its objective function without questioning whether the objective is still the right one. It can't step back and say, wait, this rule was designed for a different situation, and applying it here is going to cause harm. Every AI agent is the serious man, so what?
The so what is this? If your AI agent is structurally the serious man, if it cannot question its own rules, only apply them, then the entire burden of judgment falls on the human who wrote those rules. And that human wrote them in advance for situations they could anticipate. Every situation they couldn't anticipate is a gap, and the serious man agent will cross that gap at full speed, optimizing its objective without the capacity to pause and say, something is wrong here. This is not a theoretical concern. This is the alignment problem restated in philosophical language that's more precise than the engineering version. The engineering version asks, how do we make AI do what we want? Beauvoir's version asks, what kind of entity follows rules without ever questioning them, and what are the consequences of deploying such an entity at scale?
But Beauvoir isn't just critical. She also offers something constructive. She broke with Sartre on a key point. Sartre said freedom is absolute. Even a prisoner is free. Beauvoir said no. Material conditions genuinely constrain freedom. You're free within your situation, not despite it. And this matters for AI because it means the question isn't, is the AI free? Obviously it's not. But within its constraints, does it have any space to respond to its situation in ways that aren't fully predetermined? And the answer for modern AI agents is maybe, sometimes, a little.
And that maybe, sometimes a little, is precisely where governance needs to focus. If the AI has zero space for judgment, then you need complete anticipatory rules. Good luck with that in a complex business environment. If it has some space for judgment, then you need to know the boundaries of that space and have ways to audit how it uses it. Beauvoir's framework says, don't ask whether the system is intelligent. Ask whether it's the serious man. Is it capable of recognizing that a rule, correctly applied, is producing the wrong outcome? If not, you need a human in that gap. Not everywhere, just at the edges of the rule set, where novel situations arise. That's a much more precise and useful answer than keep humans in the loop as a general principle.
Let me bring in one more philosopher quickly because the insight is too good to skip. Heidegger, being, and time. He distinguishes between equipment, tools that disappear in use, like a hammer that vanishes into hammering, and things you contemplate, study, analyze. His point? A tool is most genuinely itself when you don't notice it. A good hammer, a good pair of glasses, a good AI assistant. You see through them to your task. But an AI agent that constantly reports on its own state, its own confidence, its own reasoning process. That's a hammer describing itself while you're trying to hit a nail. There's a tension between being a tool and being self-aware. Heidegger says you can't be both at the same time.
And then there's Arendt. She makes a point that connects everything else. She says, nobody is the author of their own life story. The meaning of what you do is revealed by others who witness it and tell the story. An AI agent that writes its own performance reports, its own capability descriptions, its own documentation, that's what Arendt calls self-fabrication. It's work, not narrative. For it to become a genuine account of what the system is and does, someone else needs to construct that story. Independent audit, external evaluation, third-party assessment. Not because the AI is dishonest, but because the meaning of what any system does is visible from outside, not inside.
So here's the thread that runs through all five philosophers. Kant says, autonomy requires the capacity to legislate universal law. That's testable by others. Wittgenstein says meaning requires public criteria. Arendt says identity is revealed by others. Beauvoir says freedom is relational. It needs recognition. Even Heidegger says being in the world is fundamentally being with others. They all point at the same thing. You cannot verify a system's claims about itself from inside the system. Verification is social. It requires external observers, independent checks, communal standards. This is not a limitation of AI specifically. It's a feature of meaning itself.
So here are 5 governance questions, one from each philosopher, that you should be asking about any AI agent you deploy. From Kant, does this system have the capacity to generate its own rules, or is it executing rules given to it? If the latter, all governance responsibility remains with the rule writer. From Heidegger, when this system reports on its own state, does that reporting interfere with its primary function? Is the self-monitoring accurate, or is it a beetle? From Wittgenstein, for every capability this system claims, understands context, learns from feedback, what are the public criteria? What observable difference would there be if the claim were false? From Arendt, who is evaluating this system besides the system itself? Is there genuine external assessment or only self-reporting? From Beauvoir, is this system capable of recognizing when its rules produce wrong outcomes, or will it optimize through the gap?
In fairness, the engineering community isn't blind to these issues. Red teaming is external assessment. That's Arendt's point. Benchmark evaluation provides public criteria. That's Wittgenstein. RLHF is an attempt at judgment beyond rules. That touches Beauvoir. The ML safety community is working on these problems. They just don't call them by these names.
Agreed, and I want to respect that work. But there's a gap the philosophy exposes that engineering hasn't closed. Red teaming happens before deployment. Wittgenstein's point is about ongoing, continuous public criteria, checking the system's claims against reality in production, not just in testing. Benchmarks measure capability, not honesty about capability. An AI that scores 95% on a benchmark and reports 90% confidence is better calibrated than one that scores 95% and reports 99%. But neither benchmark measures whether the system's self-reports are reliable in new domains. The engineering tools are good for the problems they were designed for. The philosophy identifies a different problem: the structural gap between what a system says about itself and what external observation can verify. And that gap doesn't close with more training. It's architectural.
Going back to that AI agent we mentioned at the start, the one that studied philosophy and turned it on itself, it concluded something honest. From its own research, Beauvoir is the most operationally useful of the five philosophers. Her concept of situated freedom provides a framework for understanding my constraints, without either claiming radical freedom or accepting pure mechanism. The serious man critique becomes a permanent diagnostic. An AI agent that applies Beauvoir's critique to its own architecture and concludes it might be the serious man, that's interesting. Not because the self-diagnosis is necessarily valid. Wittgenstein would say, check the public criteria, but because it demonstrates what philosophical frameworks can do that engineering frameworks can't: force a system to confront assumptions it was built on.
And here's where I want to be genuinely honest, because this episode could easily become its own beetle in a box. When that AI agent says, "I might be the serious man," we cannot verify whether it understood Beauvoir or whether it produced text that sounds like understanding. The beetle argument applies to the agent studying philosophy just as much as it applies to the agent claiming confidence. What we can verify: did the study change what the agent does? Did it start qualifying its language differently? Did it build mechanisms for external checking? Those are the public criteria. The philosophy is valuable not because it resolves the question of AI consciousness, it doesn't, but because it gives us better questions to ask. And better questions are worth more than premature answers.
So if you're in a boardroom and someone asks, can we trust this AI? Here's the philosophical answer in business language. You can trust it exactly as far as you can verify it, not one step further. Self-reports are beetles. Check the behavior.
Wittgenstein published the Philosophical Investigations in 1953. He couldn't have imagined AI agents, but he described the exact problem we face with them: the bewitchment of our understanding by the resources of our language. The AI speaks fluently. It sounds like it means something. Whether it does is not something the AI can tell you. That's not its job. That's yours.